So all I do these days is work on my comic 9 Point, which is a lovely comic, and I do enjoy it. However, I've wanted a little bit of a break to do something else, and I think that this exercise has definitely kind of put some fire back into my heart when it comes to making things. So here's what I did. I decided to try out a new style, very different from my own, just to kind of get the creative juices flowing, see if I can learn a new thing that I've always kind of wanted to be able to draw, but like didn't know how. So my plan for this was I found like 3 different like cutesy anime styles that I wanted to learn that I really like, and I was like, I want to see if I can recreate these. So unfortunately, I ran out of time just due to some silly work things. So I was only able to do 1 for this video, but maybe in the future, if people like this, I can work on the other 2 that I found. So for this one, I wanted to try out the style of Satchely, who's a lovely artist who did the art for Doki Doki Literature Club. We'll put a link to their Twitter down below if you want to go look at their work, because it's wonderful. But yeah, so I grabbed some examples of their work, mainly the sprites from Doki Doki. And so I decided, I don't know where to start, but you know, when I'm learning anything, whether I'm like drawing from life or trying to figure out a style or, you know, whatever it is that I don't know how to draw, what I do is I usually start by tracing whatever the thing is or doing red lines over top just to figure out the forms. So in this case, I started by kind of tracing over the forms instead of trying to eyeball them, just so I can get some like proper proportions and stuff of this style. And then I decided I would try to recreate this sprite of Monica, just to see if I could do it. And just kind of going over the forms and the color style and the line style in like a really, it basically like a copy, just to see kind of how it works and get it as close as possible. And then from there, I was like, after that, once I kind of figure out what the heck is going on, then I'll try my hand at like recreating it just by eyeballing it with my own picture. So yeah, what I learned from trying to draw this, there's so much detail in the hair and within the eyes, which feels very like characteristic of a lot of kind of anime style stuff. And one thing I really like about this style is that it feels so delicate in a way that like I feel like my art is just not delicate at all. So it was really cool to kind of study to see like how that works. And I went in and like before I started this, I went and watched some like process work of Satchely just to see like how, you know, she did her work and how it is. I was like, because I didn't know where to start. And it was really interesting because from what I can tell, she'll do these really, not super thick, but these thick like sketches underneath. And then she'll line things with these really like thin, delicate lines. And they'll usually have like very little line weight to them. And then she'll go over top and like add in weight where it needs to be, like so like creating like thicker lines around the eyes or like weight around the chin and on the hair pieces and stuff, which is something I struggle with. I tend to put in a lot of line weight on my stuff just as I line things. So it was really difficult to not add a lot of pressure, and I think I failed in a lot of ways doing that. But yeah, that was difficult to do, and I admire people who can do it. It creates this really lovely, delicate look to it, where you kind of hardly notice the line work when you actually look at the art, and it kind of lets the colors shine through quite a bit. The other thing, she does very like pastel kind of flat colors onto everything, and then she goes in with like a flat hard brush and does a lot of the shadow work, and then we'll put in gradients and go over things with like softer, more airbrushy type brushes to kind of soften things out. And yeah, it was just a cool process to watch and to try out. So yeah, so that is what I did. I did a lot of like color picking from the original image just to kind of get an idea of things. I know for the color palette of Doki Doki, I noticed that things are very warm and red. There's lots of like pinks and purples in there as well, especially with like the other characters, where Monica's more like very kind of like warm earthy colors. But I noticed things like a lot of stuff was like shaded in with red. You look at Monica's hair and you think like, oh, that's brown, but if you look at it, it's like a surprisingly like bright pink. But it was just interesting to go through things and see how it all worked. But I think I definitely struggled the most with like adding in the detail to the hair and to the eyes. There's lots of like little small like gradient shifts and going in and adding like colored lines and defining the different hair bits a lot more than I typically do. I tend to not put a lot of detail into my work, so it was very interesting to kind of try it out with someone else's stuff. And I learned I'm not great at it, but I tried my best. Eventually, once I'd figured out kind of how to draw Monica and kind of what the style was really quickly, in this very messy fashion, I was like, okay, now I gotta try and draw my own without tracing anything. See if I can recreate this style just by eyeballing it, which was really difficult. One thing about the style, and admittedly, the characters from Doki Doki, their proportions are all kind of like a little bit off, and just looking at the artist's like broader work, it feels like the proportions were really pushed to be kind of like weird and off kilter, and very much in the style of like, it felt like an exaggerated version of like a visual novel sprite, if that makes sense. And if you know the game, then it feels like kind of intentional to me. But so the proportions on this one, they're very different from what I'm used to drawing with my own style, but I think they're pushed like a little bit extra to look kind of weird and kind of off, but still cute. Like, it's still super adorable. Also, one of my favorite things about Doki Doki is that like the busts of all the characters are super detailed and rendered. It's really funny, but which is why I think it's like an exaggerated version of like visual novel style. But anyways, so I had a lot of trouble kind of balancing the cuteness and the new proportions, because like my fear in trying to recreate this was it would look like those old like how to draw manga for beginners books that were made by like Americans, and they looked nothing like actually cute anime, and they just looked really weird. Like, I was really afraid that it would turn out like that. So that was my fear. I definitely got a lot of the proportions off. Like, I noticed in with these sprites that like the eyes are way more far apart than I'm used to drawing, whereas I tend to draw eyes kind of very close together, and I tend to draw my eyes very wide. So I found it really hard to get the eyes to be like far apart and still look okay, and I think I kind of messed up the alignment on them. Like, one feels higher than the other. If I was doing something more detailed, I would probably put in some ruler lines so that I got everything perfect, because like the style is very symmetrical, and just people who can do really symmetrical like fine detail work is like, how? My brain is too messy for this. So I went in, tried my best with doing some delicate lines. I think I definitely went too thick with, say, like portions of the face. I think with the hair, there are parts of it where it feels like delicate and it's the right balance, but there are some places where like I definitely went way too thick with the lines, and it became very like Ursula style line work, especially in the hair and the pigtails. But I tried my best. The flat coloring, I definitely had to play around with the colors. I went different than the kind of color tone of Doki Doki, which is a lot more earthy, and I went more kind of like cool pinks and purples for the colors, as well as like adding in shadows and stuff. It was weird. It was weird to try out. I also had a lot of technical difficulties while drawing this, so there's parts that might be missing because it just wouldn't record. Especially when I was working on the shading and detail work, I looked up and I was like, no, I didn't record it because the recording software crashed. So there are parts missing, but hopefully you get you understand it by the end. So I did a lot of like, I'd put down a flat color and then I'd add in like a really subtle gradient on top, because I noticed, it's kind of hard to tell looking at the final artwork, but looking at the process work I looked at before, I noticed that she'd put down like a really subtle gradient on top of, say, like the hair or the skin. So I tried doing that, and I like it. It turned out, you know, you don't see it necessarily when you're looking at the final artwork, but having it there kind of like, it definitely adds to the style and keeping it really delicate and glowy as well. It's a very glowy style. And I found it so difficult. So I put down these gradients, and then I added in kind of the flat, hard brush shadows and stuff, and then I tried to go in and kind of soften things up. I found it really hard to find places to put all the little details because I was like, it just feels like too much. My brain was like, scale it back, you don't need this much detail. So I had to like force myself to sit down and like try and draw in all the little strands and figure out where all the shadows fall and stuff, and I was like, this hurts me, but I tried my best. So I put in all the detail. The hair took forever just to figure out. But yeah, so once I had the hard brush stuff put in, from there, I think the footage is gone, but from there I like kind of alpha locked the hard brush shadow stuff I'd done, and I went over with a gradient because I noticed that like if you look at say Monica's sprite, there's like some darker shadow gradients like at the top of her hair, and then it'll like gradient down to something lighter. And then there'll be like darker shadows kind of like drawn in with the strands. So I did some of that stuff, like adding ingredients all over the hair to try and make it feel really shiny and get like a good differentiation of like values throughout the hair. And hopefully it still made sense. And then from there, I tried to go in and create more like more little details with the strands. I added in some like kind of halo-y light effects on the hair to make it really shiny and pop. And then finally I ended with working on the eyes and trying to get all the little details in there. There's so many little details in those eyes if you like stare deeply into them like I did. Where like there's so many different like colors in there, so many different like tones and shades, and like I remember as a kid watching tons and tons of like, not watching, but reading tons of tutorials about like how to create those really like glossy anime eyes, and always trying it, and it never worked for me because I was a little baby and I didn't understand art. But now I was like, I can kind of copy the forms, but it still is like, I don't know, it's so much detail. My brain's like, no, we skipped this. So I tried my best. Hopefully it looks cute. It's really bizarre. I kept looking at it while I was drawing it and be like, this didn't come out of me. This was not made by my hand. It was really bizarre. And Bones, who's sitting on the couch beside me while I was drawing, he kept looking over and was like, I can't believe you made that. And I was like, right? This doesn't look like my work. So it was a cool experience. I'm kind of glad that it turned out better than I thought it would. It's not a total match to the original. It's still very like Ursula. But I tried something new. I learned some new things. I might bring some of these new ideas to my own work in the future. But most importantly, it was really fun. And I learned some stuff. But yeah, I definitely feel inspired to do more art. It was nice to take a break from kind of the typical stuff and just do some studies. I've been joking that I'm like studying my fundamentals by studying anime. But yeah, so I may in the future do more of those studies with some other artists that I like, and just see if I can recreate their style. So let me know if this was fun. I would definitely say studying from other people's styles is a really useful tool, so long as you're not copying someone's work and claiming it as your own. That would be bad, but definitely just using this for study and trying to improve your own stuff by studying, people who are really good at illustration in your field. I think that's valid. That's a valid learning tool. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Did I draw the kawaii cutie desu desu animes? Yeah, subscribe, I guess. Goodbye!